A growing number of teams have issued statements indicating that due to pandemic-related concerns, they will exercise their prerogative to not participate in on-field workouts in 2021. This has been an issue that's lingered for a while. J.C. Tretter, the president of the union, wants to get rid of the on-field off-season workouts altogether. The number of teams now up to 10. That means 22 have yet to speak. I wonder how many of those teams have decided, we're good. We're going to show up for the voluntary off-season program. Because, look, Peter, I don't think the union really knows what the reason is. I think there are multiple different reasons for it, and we're going to talk about that. But the bottom line is players are going to work out somewhere. They're not going to sit home and do nothing. They're going to try to get ready for training camp. The question is, are they going to work out at the team facility and be protected against any injury they may suffer? Are they going to stay home and ride the exercise bike and do push-ups and put in the old P90X DVDs? If you get injured there, you're not covered. They're going to go to Planet Fitness and lift weights there, drop a weight on your foot, bust your toe, you're not covered. Go to the local high school field, step on a rock, pop an Achilles, you're not covered. I hope the union is explaining to these guys the risk they're taking if they exercise anywhere other than in the team facility. You're putting your entire salary on the line for 2021 if you do that. So unless you're going to sit home, and I'll say this to all the players out there, all three of them that may be watching, and I'd take the under, to understand the risk you're taking if you are exercising anywhere but the team facility. And that's one of the reasons why I think as players understand this, Peter. Look, it's admirable to take a stand. I support the union generally. I just think this isn't it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, Mike. This is a very interesting little conflict. And you could tell last fall when J.C. Tretter began to talk about how we need to totally remake the offseason in the NFL. You know, this has been a fantastic season for, health and well-being of players. So the way I look at this is a little bit of the union flexing its muscles and saying to the NFL, look, these workouts are voluntary. And so we're not going to come if we don't want to come. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about this. I think one of the key things about this and why it is such an interesting time in the union and in the relationship between players and management in the NFL is, Mike, think about this, okay? 1,019 players voted to approve the new collective bargaining agreement that included the 17th game. 969 players voted against it. That, on average, is 2 players per locker room. That was the margin. 60 votes is the margin. So you've got a tremendous number of players on both sides. And you know what I think of whenever I see each one of these statements from teams? I think of those 969 players. I think of Alvin Kamara. I think of the ticked off guys at the 17th game. And I think, hey, listen, we're going to show up and we're going to play. And we're going to be there 47 days before the start of the season for opening a training camp. Beyond that, we're not doing anything that we don't have to do.
I love that in theory, Peter, and I think there's so much imbalance in the relationship anyway between the league and the union because the league will use the nuclear option of lost games to a work stoppage, whether it's a lockout or a strike, or if it's a strike, they'll just use replacement players and keep going. The players won't, as we learned in 1987, hold together in the face of a work stoppage that takes away game checks. I just think there's a huge disconnect between the collective desire to give the owners a middle finger and the individual issues that are going to arise. J.C. Tretter made the comment earlier this week to Rich Eisen that the notion, as articulated by Bruce Arians, that this is just a matter of veterans not wanting younger players to get an opportunity to show that they can take roster spots. Tretter called that an effort to divide the union. No, it's not. It's a recognition of the inherent divisions. This is a unique workforce. You got 90 guys per team now, ultimately 90 once they add the draft picks and the undrafted free agents. It's going to whittle down to 53. 37 guys are going to be gone. Now, some of them will be on the practice squad, but they're not getting the full game checks. They're competing for those spots. So at some point, Peter, the individual impetus to be one of the 53 is going to win out. You're going to have young players particularly who understand there's an opportunity here. And if the other players are upset with me, I don't care. The coach is happy with me, and he's the one who decides whether or not I'm on the team, not these other guys who are mad at me, and some of them may end up getting cut anyway because they're not here. That's the problem that this entire approach is inviting. So, again, I firmly believe, I love it. I love to see the union flexing its muscles. The problem is they're going to throw out a lumbar disc in the process because it's going to expose and yet again reinforce the idea that collective action by this union can't work because there's too many guys whose best interests are going to be get your ass into the building and show up. I mean, Peter, plain and simple, once you understand, because these guys are not going to sit on the couch and watch TV. They're going to work out. Once they understand that if they get injured away from the facility, they don't get paid this season. If they get injured in the facility, it's basically free insurance against that fluke injury that may happen. I think once they understand that, this isn't going to hold together.
Mike, you talk about the 37 guys per team who are going to be gone. It really isn't that, because practice squads this year are going to be somewhere between 14 and 16.
They don't get paid. They don't get paid the same.
Right. I understand they don't get paid the same, but what I'm talking about is they still are allowed to vote, and they still are allowed to express their opinions, in terms of, what their team is going to do. So the only point I'm making about this is that there is a gigantic middle and lower class in the National Football League that, in my opinion, hugely influenced the vote for the last CBA. And Mike, if that vote doesn't pass, I believe right now, there's no way you have the $113 billion media agreements that they signed last month. Absolutely no way. And you know what else they don't have? They don't have labor peace. They would not have gotten a deal done. And so right now, I believe you would be either in a lockout or on the verge of a lockout. And this season would be in total disarray. And I think all that is because the middle and lower class players basically stampeded to the ballot box and won this election, for a new CBA, much to D. Smith's pleasure. And so right now, I think you're seeing the results of that, because I just think there's a lot of big players and big time players who are still ticked off over that, and who say, we're not giving the NFL any cooperation on this. And I see your point. You have a really good point about if they get hurt working out somewhere, they're screwed. But I still think that the first reaction is going to be, we're not helping management at all.
Oh, and I agree with you there. And as this settles in, that's when it begins to crumble. Peter, the way that the NFL has set up the offseason schedule this year is conducive to undermining the resolve of the veteran players, because phase 2 of the offseason program, May 17 that week, it also consists of the rookie mini camps. And that comes before there's ever an opportunity for the players to not show up for on-field work in phase 3. That comes the next week. So before the players can ever truly flex their muscles and have an empty locker room on the day that they're going to practice for the first time in the offseason, before that occurs, you'll have the draft picks, you'll have the undrafted free agents, you'll have all the tryout participants, and there will be many of them at the rookie minicamp. There's 40, 50 guys that show up for this rookie minicamp. That's going to happen in 32 teams before we ever get to the point where the veterans don't show up. And you know what's going to happen? We're going to see all this footage of practice, and we're going to have quotes from coaches. And the average person who's paying minimal attention to this is going to be thinking, well, there went that NFLPA boycott thing. There's all these guys practicing. I mean, it's gonna undermine the resolve of the veterans before we even get to day one of this legitimate and permissible boycott of voluntary offseason workouts. And who's going to be there for phase 3, for the start of the traditional on-field workouts? It's going to be the undrafted free agents, most of the draft picks, and whoever happens to get a job via the tryout portion of the rookie minicamp. They're going to be there. So while the veterans are home, either doing nothing or risking their salaries by working out at Planet Fitness, product placement for no reason whatsoever, the young guys are going to be there getting the reps, currying favor with the coaching staff, and it's not going to take long. Just like, it reminds me of the 87 strike. And the scabs from 87 are the undrafted players and the rookies in 2021. After a week or two of that, at most, the veterans are going to come back because they're going to realize the train's going to keep rolling without them, and they're making it even harder for themselves to make the 53-man roster if all these young guys are there getting the first-team reps.
Mike, let me ask you a question. Suppose that the union went to management right now and said, as of right now, a new coach in this season, right? A new coach could have had his players in-house. I think the date was April 6th. It was somewhere right around there. And then it was pushed back 2 weeks, right? But why don't players and management, why isn't there a compromise where you say no player in any facility, pick a date in May, no player goes to any facility until, let's say, May 10th, okay? So it gives the players, in essence, another month where they're basically free of any obligations. So to me, that might be a compromise if I am a veteran player that I would appreciate even more. But what are the pros and cons of that in your mind?
Well, I think one of the realities is, my understanding is there's already 400 players who are actively showing up on a regular basis and working out at the team facility because they can, because they understand the benefit of doing it there, working out on their own. For a variety of reasons, they're allowed to do so. As of right now, the full gathering of the players doesn't happen until the week of May 24 anyway. That's what's so confusing about this. When I saw the NFL's full schedule for the offseason program, as it was proposed to the union, and the union said, no, thank you, I look at it and I say, well, what's the problem with it? See, this is the thing that gnaws at me, Peter, because the NFLPA doesn't have one cohesive explanation for why it's doing what it's doing. The surface level is the pandemic. Well, it's not the pandemic. If you're concerned about the pandemic, number one, go get vaccinated. Number two, why do you have an issue with the league using, but then beyond that, even if you don't get a vaccine, why all of a sudden do you have an issue with the exact same protocols that you agreed to last year for training camp, regular season, postseason? The same protocols apply when the players are there for the on-field workouts. Why do you hate those now? We've never gotten an answer to that because I think the pandemic is being used as cover for, one, this is a middle finger to the NFL for having the upper hand in the relationship, the rebellion against the 17-game season, and two, guys like J.C. Tretter don't want any offseason program under any circumstance. Pandemic's a convenient thing to point to, but the pandemic isn't the reason why they're doing this. So it's creating this impression that they, you're not going to sell this unless you've got a rallying cry that everyone understands. The rallying cry collectively is not going to overcome the rallying cry in each of these guys' houses when they're getting tough questions from spouse, significant other, parent, agent. Why the hell aren't you at work? What are they going to say? Why aren't you there? Well, they told me not to go. Well, why? Well, I don't know. They didn't want to go. But why? It's not going to hold together at that point, and that's when you're going to start seeing guys crossing a non-existent picket line.
Look, the last time that something like this happened, or anything like this happened really, is in 1987 when the way that when the NFL hired replacement players after 2 weeks of that season to play games. and they started actually playing games. They played 3 weeks with these replacement players. And the reason that the NFLPA solidarity died, I remember Boomer Esiason, basically laying down in front of a bus with the replacement players, in Cincinnati. And the reason that died is that guys like Lawrence Taylor crossed the picket line. And a lot of Randy White in Dallas, a lot of players started crossing the picket line. And once that happened, once named players decided to go in, everything crumbled. So my feeling is we'll see. They've got 11 teams now, and we'll see how solid they're going to be. But in my opinion, I agree, Mike, that the NFL last year saw that you can have a very good, very representative, enjoyable season, that ended with some great drama and Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl and Brady versus Mahomes. It was fine. It was great. And the NFL has now seen that it can happen that way. And much to the chagrin of coaches, I really, really wonder, the coaches whose jobs are really on the line, how are they going to handle this? Like I'm serious. What if Matt Nagy cannot have Andy Dalton in for the entire length of the offseason? His job is on the line. Andy Dalton's job is on the line in the future as well. That's why I think this is going to be some interesting drama in the next few weeks.
And the coaches, and we've known this for 20 years, it rarely gets enforced, but most coaches are smart enough to avoid the line. They're not allowed to say or do anything to suggest that the voluntary workouts or anything. But, however, there's going to be no way to police whatever coaches say to the agents of specific players off the grid, talking to them, hey, I need your guy here. Look, we've known each other for a long time. We've done a lot of work together. We're going to continue to do a lot of work together. I value the relationship. I'm sure you do too. I need your guy here. You got to get him here. And most of the agents are already wired to get their guys there. The guys who have workout bonuses, they're going to be there. The young guys who are trying to get one of those 53 jobs or one of the spots on the practice squad, they're going to be there because their agents are going to tell them to be there. And one last point in that regard, Peter. Well, 2 points. One, the NFLPA is not going to pressure 4 teams whose players have significant roster bonuses: Packers, Bills, Jaguars, Chiefs. That in and of itself creates an inherent division that will attract players from their competitors to show up because those teams are all working and getting ready. And secondly, we mentioned that 87 strike. I haven't researched this point of labor law, which is the subtle way that a lawyer says, I don't know the answer to the question. I haven't researched that quite yet. I don't know whether or not you can even have a picket line when you're talking about collective action that isn't a strike. It's not a strike. It's just guys exercising their prerogative under the CBA to not show up voluntarily. I wonder if they're going to have guys at or close to the edge of team facility property trying to keep guys out. I wonder if they're going to do that, and I wonder if they even can legally try. That's a wrinkle to this I hadn't considered. But if they're serious about it, they may have to do whatever they have to do to keep those guys from getting in. And if you got the veterans lined up out there and they're eyeballing you and they're telling you don't go across, that makes for some drama that I hadn't really anticipated.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's going to be an interesting story, because we don't know how it's going to play out over the next, let's say, month. And it's kind of interesting. The draft is going to be in the middle of it. So this is going to take a significant back seat, I believe, Mike, in terms of the news cycle and all that. Because, look, honestly, tell me why any fan should care about this. If I'm a fan, I don't care. I was thinking about this yesterday. What am I going to do in my column on Monday about this? And I mean, this is going to be one of these things that people are just going to glaze over, and they don't care, and they're not going to be passionate about it. So I really wonder, let's say in the next month, if indeed, as you say, that players could really get strong-armed into not showing up, you know, how big of an issue is it going to be from team to team to team? And I think I I really wonder. I don't think the public cares at all, number one. But number two, I wonder about things like team chemistry and how you're going to build whatever you're going to do this season in this offseason program. Coaches are going to figure a way, even if the NFLPA throws an incendiary device at the offseason programs around the league. Coaches will figure it out. But I do think that this is going to be a real uncomfortable time for a lot of teams and players.
And you say the fans don't care. I think part of what we do is make them care by drawing out the angles that are interesting and that show how things can collapse and how you can get yourself into a problem. And hey, if I'm a Bears fan and I know the Packers are going to be there because the union's not squeezing them to stay away and they're going to be getting better and they're going to be getting ready, if I'm a Bears fan, I'm not happy with that because my team's already starting with a hand behind its back as the Packers are getting ready to, build on what they've done the last two seasons.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.